Reverend Rod Fisher. I'm the minister here. I've been here for 3 months, so I'm guessing you all know this area and a whole lot better than I do. And so it's wonderful, though, to welcome you here to this local candidate forum. This is one of about 30 that are happening over these next couple of weeks in Queensland, and coming off the back of the same things that were organised in New South Wales last year, which was a wonderful way to engage local candidates on issues that mattered to people. It's not always the best, despite what we'd think, the best way to try to engage governments and parliaments through heads of churches, but to talk to people on the ground, to hear and be heard so that people know what's going on. So Freedom for Faith is an organisation that has helped to organise this in conjunction with Queensland churches together. And we've invited all of our local churches to be part of tonight and has promoted that. And Father Mark Franklin from the Kenmore and Moggill Catholic Church is an apology tonight. Ed Marshall, pastor at the Baptist Church, is an apology. Rob Sutherland had us another thing on as the Anglican priest, and John Gill from Bellbowrie Community Church wasn't able to be here. However, we do have a number of people here. Anyone here who's from the Catholic Church at Kenmore or Moggill? What about the Anglican Church? We've got a couple, excellent. From Bellbowrie Community Church? Woo. And from here? From somewhere else? Heard about it and just came anyway? Excellent. Now, you may be aware, if you read the bulletin, that there is actually a public community forum next Tuesday at Chapel Hill, being hosted by the Uniting Church there, and David Bush is facilitating that. All of our local candidates, I believe, are planning to be at that, and that is a forum for the whole community. This is one of those 30, like I said, particularly for those people of faith and from a Christian faith, to be able to hear and be heard with our local candidates on issues that matter particularly to a significant demographic in our local community. So we've got Dr. Christian Rowan here this evening and Dr. Eric Richmond. Not doctor, but Andrew Caird, the Greens candidate, was unable to make it tonight, but he will be at the one next week. And so it's wonderful to have those guys with us tonight. For those who need to during the night, feel free down through past the little divider and down the hallway. There's toilets, there's extra ones around the corner as well. Feel free to use that if you need to. Tonight, the way that people are going to be asking questions, not from the floor, but through an app called Slido, and there's a paper version going around. Dave will explain that in a moment. Those who have tuned in online, I know there's several people already following the stream, and welcome to all those who are. Just note that you're hearing this probably about 40 seconds after it's said, so as you're engaging on your Slido app, which will be instant, you'll be seeing things 40 seconds after they happened. So Dave will explain how that works. It's super easy way to see what other people have asked. If you need someone to help you with that, it's very easy to do that. Again, the purpose of tonight is for us to gather in a very positive way, to listen carefully, to make sure that our local candidates are aware of some of those issues that are important to us, and that we also have an opportunity to hear what's important to our local candidates. And sometimes that's identical to what we read in the bulletin or their party, and sometimes there's some nuances there too, and it's great to hear those things. I'd like to begin this evening with a short devotion and a prayer. It's interesting when we look at political things and elections, and social media is a not so wonderful way of engaging, particularly when we see America demonstrating how we don't want to do politics. How can we disagree and still be mates? How can we have different opinions about things and still respect one another? How can we listen to understand and not just wait to try to win an argument? Proverbs 14 verse 29 says, "Whoever is patient has great understanding, but one who is quick-tempered displays folly. In the book of James, we hear, "My dear sisters and brothers, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry." And Paul, writing to Colossians chapter 3, "Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with one another. Forgive one another if any of you has a grievance. Forgive as the Lord forgave you." I'd like to read the words of a prayer for peace attributed to St. Francis of Assisi. "Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. O Divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life." Loving God, we thank you for your presence with us, whether we're here in this space, whether we're tuning in from the live stream, whether the technology confuses us or it's easy. We ask that in this space, we may all have hearts open to listen and to learn, to respond with courage and conviction, that we may all leave this place with more wisdom, with more understanding, that in the decisions that we are called to make. We ask these prayers in Jesus' name. Amen. One of the wonderful supports we've had is from Queensland Churches Together. 9 or 10 different churches all working together to advise and assist the government in developing policy and legislation. And the Secretary of Queensland Churches Together, Reverend David Baker, is a local and he's here and he's going to explain to us how we are using our technology tonight. Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Rod. And thanks for the opportunity to share tonight, and for the candidates coming, and the opportunity just for us to, in a sense, see you face to face and have a yarn and get a sense of what's important to you, and for us to be able to share what's important to us. It's a great part of the democratic process that we're in. So we're going to use Slido tonight, and Keith, if you could put up on the magic screen. So Slido is a means by which you can kind of enter into a Q&A process in a meeting. So if you've got your smartphones there, all you have to do, and we'll be doing this a little later in the evening, is to just head to slido.com and enter that code, and that will give you an opportunity to be able to type in a question. That'll come up on Rod's screen, so Rod will be able to see those questions as they come through and present them to the group. So that we might keep that up for the time that we need. As Rod said, there's about 15 or 18 church leaders across Queensland have been supporting this venture, and I helped them put together a few set questions that, at that level of the life of the church, they see as important for us as a community here in Queensland, and important to the life of the churches in Queensland. And there's about 5 of those. One of those was around freedom of faith and freedom of speech. One was around housing and homelessness, particularly to do with the housing affordability and rental, access to rental. Another one was to do with youth, addressing the issues of youth crime and the issues of youth generally in terms of mental health and well-being. And there was, I'm just trying to remember them all now, there was one on RI and state schools, which is a large, it's quite a substantial ministry across the life of the state schools in Queensland, and now a multi-faith endeavour. And the other one was particularly coming from rural and regional Queensland, issues around transitioning the economy, from a post-fossil fuel based economy. So they were the 5 broad questions that the church leaders in Queensland came up with. We might be using all of them tonight, or we might just use a couple of them up to Rod and see how we go. So there'll be opportunity for the candidates to address a couple of those questions, and then an opportunity for us to, through the Slido, raise up issues or themes that you'd like them to address yourself. They'll have an opportunity just to speak for a few minutes themselves. We've got a timekeeper down here, very polite young man. He'll be keeping an eye on them in terms of time. I think we've got a few on live stream. Keith? There's 37 on live stream, so certainly put off a few, maybe, the storm put off a few from coming physically, but 37 is a pretty good number. There's probably, well, I'm a Uniting Church minister, I'll say there's 100 in the room. So we've probably got more online than we do actually have here, so we'll have to really work the Slido, Rod, won't we? Yeah, so that'll be fun. But thank you for coming, and particularly thanks to the candidates for being prepared to come tonight and share here. So I think that's all I need to do, Rod. Thank you.
Yeah, I just logged into Slido on my phone. And the other thing, for those watching online or in the room, you can see all the questions that people are writing, most recent, that kind of thing. If someone writes a question that you think, that's exactly what I want, you don't have to write it again. Just click the like button. So if a question gets 426 likes, that's one of the first ones we're going to ask later. Okay, so it's a lot easier for us if you see what someone has written and you that's your question. Just click the little thumb up, and if it's got 23 of those, then when we rank them, we'll look at that one first. So there's already lots of that. You can ignore the one about the hairy-nosed wombat. That was Dave 8 hours ago, just testing to make sure. I don't think anyone's prepared a response to the hairy-nosed wombat question.
It's a very important question.
Yeah. So, and if you've got a question and you don't have a phone, just get the person beside you to type it in or borrow their phone. Everything's anonymous, so no one's going to go, "Oh, you asked that." Dave asked the hairy-nosed wombat one, okay? But again, if there's a question, if there's a question that you like, please don't like the wombat. Just click the thumb up, and then we'll see that that's an important question. We'll get to those questions later, the ones that our candidates have had a chance to prepare and some of the Slido ones. But we thought for people like myself who are new and others and those who don't know Christian or Eric very well, that we wanted to have an opportunity just to go, well, who are these guys? Who are these candidates? More so than what we see on call flutes or bulletins and all of those kind of things. Who is Dr. Eric the person? Who is Dr. Christian the person? So I'd love to invite you guys, if you come and have a seat. There's water here. You don't have to colour code with things, but go for it. We'd love to, and people got 5 minutes. Tell us about you. Now, you don't have to read policies or anything like that, because we can read those. But tell us a little bit about yourself. What got you into politics? What are some of the things you're really passionate about? And this particular election, what are you hoping for? What are you excited about? And maybe what's some fun fact that maybe no one knows about you? In any order. Would you like to go first, Christian? Thank you, Christian.
Well, good evening, and thanks very much for organising tonight. I think it's really important as part of our democratic process to have these forums, so it's great to be here with Eric as well, who's a good colleague, and I've known him a long time. So I'm Christian Rowan. I've been the state member for Moggill since 2015. By way of background, I've trained as a specialist physician, and I've got a number of fellowships of medical colleges, been accredited at the Wesleyan St Andrews War Memorial Hospital, and worked for Queensland Health previously. I'm married, I've got 4 kids. I first moved to the western suburbs into Kenmore in 1975 with my family to Aberfeldy Street. So I came with my mother at that stage. Parents were divorced. She raised me in Kenmore there. Obviously went through both primary and secondary school and was fortunate to get into to medicine at the University of Queensland. Spent many years working in rural and remote environments and in Aboriginal communities. I think I'm incredibly grateful to my mother for the sacrifices that she made as a divorcee, I guess, being able to put me through school and to give those opportunities, which was fantastic. I've had the opportunity to serve in the Parliament for the last 10 years in various shadow portfolio areas. I'm very humbled by the support that the community has given me over that particular time, and obviously I'm running in this election again to hopefully win government and do the things that I'd like to do with respect to both health and education. I have a passion for helping people who've suffered with substance dependencies, drug and alcohol conditions, and mental health conditions as well, because that's predominantly what my clinical training has been in. But there are also things in education that I'd like to pursue, particularly around fostering civics and citizenship and re-engaging people into the sense of volunteerism and giving back to community. And there are also things locally in relation to infrastructure matters with respect to roads and public transport, our schools, our environment here, particularly protecting and looking after our environment, because we've got a unique part of Brisbane where there's significant biodiversity. So they're the things that I'm running for this time, and it's great to be here, and that's probably 5 minutes.
Your timing is very nice. All right, so those who don't know me, my name's Eric Richmond, and I work at the moment full-time as an emergency department doctor up at Ipswich Hospital, and I've been there in various capacities for 16 years. And so that's kind of my resume stuff. Who am I as a person? That's a really good question. So by background, I actually moved to Australia in 1990 and started in high school here, and through various reasons ended up skipping a couple of grades. So I was quite young when I went to university. And in that development while in university, I found a love of doing new things and finding new things. And so as I finished that out and worked as a share trader for a few years through the 90s, I realized that what I enjoy the most is service and helping people. I moved back to the States briefly because I wanted to be a paramedic. And at the time, I was literally too young to get into Queensland Ambulance Service. I went back to the United States and ended up working as a paramedic, and was a paramedic on September 11th, 2001, which was an interesting day. I raised my first two children there, and then realized that there is nothing like Australia. There is nothing like the Southeast Queensland lifestyle. There is nowhere else I wanted to live. So sold up, moved back, and had bought land out in Colo in 2002. So took 2004, moved back in 04. Took 2005 off to owner build my house. And what I didn't know how to do, I asked and learned, and spent a lot of time putting things together and learning how to do things. Entered medical school because being a paramedic is an amazing job. It really is. But I was looking for that next ability to serve more people in a bigger capacity. So I finished medical school having spent some time teaching at the medical school. So specifically, I wrote and developed the ECG course for the medical school while I was in the medical school. I wrote and had produced the clinical skills handbook that was released for the medical school while I was in the medical school. When I started work at Ipswich Hospital, I was identified early and ended up with PMCQ, the accrediting body for interns. And this started my work in systems and got to meet a lot of the hospitals around Queensland in that accreditation back-end governance capacity. And for that, I was named Queensland Junior Doctor of the Year. Interestingly, that was in 2012, and 2012 is what, in hindsight, started my political career. I was in WA receiving an award when the health minister in West Australia thanked the Queensland government, the then Newman government, for solving their recruitment issues, which is a very interesting thing for them to say. I came back to Queensland and was involved, very much was involved, in that dispute as a doctor. And in 2015, with the change, I was then identified as someone who should be involved in governance, in the back end, in sorting out how we fix the problems. And so spent a number of years in committees, never joined a committee, but my one word of advice, Never join a committee, because as soon as you join one, you end up on all of them and you can't stop. Just, all right. Time? So I was then talked to about going into politics, which I said no. And then I was asked again, and I said no. And over the years, I realized that there's really an opportunity to serve a larger number of people by bringing that skill set to the fore. And it was a long chat with my wife. It was a long chat with my kids, who are, of course, grown up now. But in the end, it is the way that I can give back to a country that has given me so much. And this is a community I love. And over the last few months, as I've met, without exaggeration, thousands of people in the community, it has been such an honor and a privilege just to meet the community and hear from everyone. So that's my time.
Thank you so much, both of you, for I'm sure there isn't anyone in the room or online who went, yeah, I knew all that. So thank you for revealing a bit more about who you are as a person, and also in your role professionally, and also in this political role. Do we have an update on some online folk? I know there's lots of people writing questions and thumbing up. Someone pushed Wombat. 48 devices are tuned in on the stream, which is awesome, and there's lots and lots of questions happening here, and we'll come to them a little later. So, as Dave mentioned, there were 5 main questions that the heads of churches had distilled some statewide themes that are obviously pointier in some regions than others, and maybe in some regions they're not that important, but those 5 questions have been sent around to all of those candidates, and there's been opportunities to prepare responses to those. So for the sake of those who haven't heard those questions, we probably won't have time for all 5 of them, but 4 of them, particularly 2 of them, are ones that would be important to people from a Christian faith or people of faith. So we'll start with those 2. I'll read the question out for those who don't know what the question is, and what has been presented to government, but also to the candidates, and they have an opportunity to respond to each of those questions with a combination of whatever the party's policy might be around that, if there is one. Sometimes they're being developed, or it might also be an overlap of where they are personally, and that might be sometimes nuanced. But the first question, if we can have on the screen there, and that's the one about freedom of religion, freedom of speech, how parties will address the international commitments to ensure this. Recent state legislation has raised concerns about the rights of faith communities to share their beliefs and live them out. Example, the recently withdrawn Anti-Discrimination Bill and the Respect at Work and Other Matters Act that has recently been passed. So the question was, how will you uphold the rights of freedom of religion and the rights of parents articulated in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which Australia has signed up to? It's a big question. Dr. Rowan, would you like to start with that one? And we've got 3 minutes for that. Thanks.
Well, I think in my my public life, I've always been a values-based leader, and the party that I represent, the Liberal National Party, believes in freedom of religion and freedom of expression and freedom of association. They are really the core values and tenets of the Liberal National Party. As you mentioned, in relation to the Respect at Work and Other Matters Amendment Bill, the LNP opposed that, and for good reasons, and that's a matter of public record in the Queensland Parliament. We believe, this is the Liberal National Party, in maintaining the current status of religious instruction in Queensland schools, but we'll also ensure that there's an ongoing mechanism of engagement between multi-faith communities and the Department of Education about these matters, and obtaining parental consent and opt-in is very, very important, and that's the framework that we would maintain.
So I don't want to interrupt, but that's a separate question we'll come to. So
Okay.
if you want to speak more about that in a minute, you don't have to rush. But this first question is more about the Freedom of Religion, Freedom of Speech Act.
Okay, so in relation to that, as I've said, they're core tenets of the Liberal National Party in relation to freedom of religion, freedom of expression and freedom of association. As I've said, as a value-based leader, I've given speeches about these matters on various aspects over my time in public life. And so that's really the position of the Liberal National Party and what I've spoken to and how I've approached these matters in public life. I'm very concerned about some moves in the community and society more generally to control language and thought. And I think there is great evidence of that occurring, and when you try to control language and thought, that's almost a form of sort of totalitarian enforcement onto populations. So I think it's really, really important that people are able to have freedom of association, freedom of religion, that we protect our faith-based communities. They have rights and entitlements in our democratic society here in Australia and around the world, and we need to do everything that we can to ensure that that's protected, whilst also acknowledging that there is the requirements for other forms of legislation to make sure that people aren't discriminated against.
Thank you for that, Dr. Owen. Dr. Richmond.
I've been having an ongoing discussion with a member of the Jewish community who's in Moggill. And we've been emailing back and forth because she's quite distressed about the rise of anti-Semitism that they're seeing. And when it comes to this issue, there is this risk where politics starts to spill into society. There is a very real risk where we have extremism by any nature or on any side. Sorry, apparently not loud enough. There's extremism on either side, and there's this push to drive us apart. What makes Australia so wonderful is our diversity. And it's diversity of thought, diversity of religion, diversity of background. It is that pluralist society that is our strength. So without going into specific legislative things, it's a question on notice. I have a written answer. You're welcome to see it. We need, as leaders, as politicians, to be pushing society together, to be holding society together and not inflaming the passions, because there is bad stuff happening in the world. There is. But we as a nation, we as a society, and we as a community must continue to push that tolerance of each other and that willingness to listen. Now, there is a place for legislative control to ensure that, to ensure freedom of religion, to ensure freedom of speech. But there is also a place for us as society leaders, and whether that be politicians, whether that be clinicians, whether that be the clergy, to hold us together, because that's who we are, and it's what makes us so strong. And listening to the fear in the Islamic community, listening to the fear in our Jewish community, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart to see it. So as far as the legislative part of that question, I'll defer to my party. And I will just say that I'm a very amateur politician, and I'm not going to specifically answer that. But as a person, I see a real need for us to continue to do what is right for us as a country, which is talking to each other. And I've had this incredible honor of just talking to a bunch of people of every faith imaginable. And that's how we fix it, is we talk to each other and we respect each other.
Thank you, Dr. Richmond. For those who wanted to see the report, it's freely available. I'm sure Dave can make it available. That the heads of churches had presented to the government with suggested amendments to the bill. That none of those happened. These were not trying to reject the bill, but to say if you make these changes, it's going to help. That's something that hopefully will be an ongoing a process, and that's also on record in government as well. The second question, which has a lot of overlap, and I think we did start to hear some of that with Dr. Owen's response, and it's about religious instruction in state schools. So it's not the same topic, but it's related. And I'll read you the blurb and the question. RI in state schools is strongly supported by parents and caregivers across the state, yet there are some voices wanting it removed from curriculum time. RI is an important reflection of a multicultural, multi-faith Queensland and is supported by all faith communities. The current enrolment process in RI is confusing and inconsistent, and parents are mostly not given specific information about what is available at their child or children's schools. Recent changes in other states have shown that improving transparency and providing consistent information about the specific RI options available at each school increases the number of parents and caregivers choosing RI for their children. To the questions. We'll start with you this time, Dr. Richmond. A was, will you commit to keeping RI in curriculum time? And B, will you work with the RI sector to ensure that parents and caregivers have an informed choice by giving clarity regarding RI options at each school on enrolment and consistent and up-to-date access to information about the specific programs available at each school? There's really long questions, aren't they? Hopefully, because you've had it on notice, you've had a chance to think. But that's the question.
It does help.
So we'll start with you, Dr. Richmond.
Well, I went to a religious school. All three of my children went to a religious school. I have, obviously, that's my personal belief. Society as a whole has a lot to teach our children. We have the same 12 years of education, and yet what we expect of them and what we provide to them increases and increases and increases. There has been an improvement in the way we teach as we learn more on how to teach. Our teachers are getting stronger, our systems are getting stronger, the modes that we can educate are getting better, so the amount that we can deliver is going up. But there are only 12 years and there are only so many hours in the day. The risk with legislative enforcing of a particular thing, and it doesn't matter what that thing is that it needs to come from somewhere. I worry that legislative mandating of anything over the informed position of the experts in this area is risky. To the second part of the question, will I engage with, and yeah, of course, absolutely. I don't pretend to be an expert in this at all. And I think we've heard enough that I like talking to people. I like hearing from them and hearing diversity of opinion. So to the second part of the question, absolutely I will engage and be a part of that. To the first part, which was around specific mandating, I am less certain that that is the right answer, but given that I went to a religious school and my three children also did, you can know where my bias is. I just worry that legislative mandating is not necessarily the best way to achieve an outcome.
Thank you, Dr. Richmond. Dr. Owen.
Okay, so as I was saying before, we believe in religious instruction. That's both myself and the Liberal National Party. We believe that it should be within curriculum time. However, we believe that it's parental choice, so an opt-in scenario is the best option, but fundamental to that is giving people the informed choice, the appropriate information that they can make an informed decision should they wish to opt in or not opt in. I think the other aspect of religious instruction is that there are many texts and important aspects with respect to our history, which are really fundamental to underpinning not only English, but providing historical context as well. And if I just reference the current circumstances in the Middle East as well, some of the things and commentary I've heard about how the current set of circumstances has come about, and also religious aspects related to that. Fundamentally, when you read some of the things that are printed in the newspaper and in social media and other things are fundamentally incorrect. So I think people having an understanding of various religions is really, really important, not only for developing an ethical framework, but also being aware of how we come to be where we are now and thousands of years of history as well. So I think there's an important aspect with respect to the curriculum. But fundamentally, as a party, we believe in choice. We believe in parents making those decisions, but fundamentally to them making those decisions is that they are provided with good information which they can make those decisions on. But to answer the questions, yes, we believe in religious instructions, yes, in curriculum time, but we believe in parental choice and the opt-in framework, which is in existence.
Thank you both for that. And before this career, I was a teacher in the state high school system and got to speak Educanese very fluently. For those who aren't aware, RI in state schools is part of an act that's already legislated, and I think part of the issue I think you've both touched on is how things can fit, and with curriculum time can be tricky, but making sure that people have the right information and that the systems in place make that possible is always going to be an ongoing tricky thing. The third question that has been raised and is an issue for everyone, and most people have been touched by this directly or indirectly, is about housing and homelessness. And that I think Brisbane just recently was ranked the second most expensive place to try to live in the country. That's not on the question, that was just on the radio. Queenslanders are experiencing a multifaceted housing crisis across the state. Young people can't get into the housing market, families can't find places to rent, homelessness is increasing markedly. Some churches have offered a variety of strategies to alleviate this. So there's two questions. The first is, what are your plans to address housing affordability, access to affordable and social housing, and addressing the cost of renting? And the second part is, will you commit to work with the churches so that they can contribute to the relief of this crisis? We'll start with you, Dr. Rowan.
Okay, so to answer that second part first, the LNP has already given a commitment to working with churches to identify suitable land of which they have to build social and affordable housing, and that's a policy that's been released by the LNP, because we know that across not only urban but regional and rural Queensland there are certainly significant possibilities of accessing some of that land, but that again has to be done methodically with detailed consultation and working with relevant local governments there with respect to development application approvals and to delivering that. So the LNP has given a firm commitment to more social housing, more community housing and more homelessness services. And we've also given the commitment that we'll deliver 53,500 additional social and community homes by 2044. And as I've said, 10,000 of those homes would be on church and charity-owned land, and particularly in partnership with the community housing sector, with 500 of those homes to be built within the first 2 years of a LNP government. We'd also invest in the $2 billion housing investment fund into building new social housing. And we know at the moment there are 50,000 Queenslanders which are currently on the social housing wait list, and that needs to be brought down as a matter of urgency. So fundamental to Queenslanders and to people's futures is having a roof over their head, having a home to live in. We've said we'll abolish stamp duty for first home buyers as well. We know that there's a certain amount of complexity when it comes to working between state and local governments with respect to ensuring that the legislative framework that's in place allows for those homes to be built. And so we are very focused on that, given the current set of circumstances that exist here in Queensland.
Thank you, Dr. Rowan. Dr. Richmond.
So this is where I'm going to become, unfortunately, a little party political, and I apologize. We are now seeing a government that is actively building houses, is actively getting there and doing it. And at the state level, we are able to do that because we hold government. We are building houses with a goal of 1 million new homes by 2046. But we're also setting up the pipelines. So the free TAFE means that we have more tradies coming up to actually build stuff. So that's what we're able to do at the state level. And I appreciate that this is a state election. But at the federal level, you can see what happens when groups put their electoral need above the needs of Australians. And we are currently seeing the Greens and the LNP working together with the sole purpose of preventing houses from being built, with the sole purpose of preventing us from doing what matters to actually help the people on the ground. And it's disgusting. And it's upsetting, because homelessness is a real issue, and we are currently engaging in active processes, again, to build the houses, to develop the pipeline, to support renters, to cut the stamp duty, to boost social housing. We are doing all of those things. And we are only able to do that because we currently are not blocked by the other parties. And at the federal level, that's what we're seeing. So we really do see a stark difference here, and I do apologize for being party political in a political debate, heaven forbid. But this one does matter. There is a real difference here, and it's worth seeing.
Can I respond to that?
Sure.
Okay, so if we're talking about under the Labor government, as I mentioned, there are 50,000 people on the social housing wait list. They had a $2 billion housing investment fund that's built 0 public houses. And if we look at rents here in Queensland, they're up 66% under the current Labor government as well, with a lack of affordability. So there hasn't been proper planning that's taken place over the last 10 years when it comes to land identification, working with local government and delivering the housing stock supply that's needed here in Queensland. There's also been the matters of failing to deal with population growth, which has come from interstate and also from overseas as well. And governments that fail to plan end up with circumstances where we've got people living out of their cars across various demographics and various communities right across Queensland. So I think it's really, really important to acknowledge that that is the core responsibility of the Labor government, and that's the current set of circumstances at the moment.
Sure. Did you want to say anything else? I think perhaps we can agree that it is a multifaceted issue. It's a complex problem. There's no such thing as an easy solution to a complex problem. That it is a rough thing when there's people on a wait list for housing for rent, that rent's gone up, because rents have gone up, and we need to find a way to deal with that. I think the other issue is unavoidably sometimes states and federals, whether they're from the same party or not, don't always see eye to eye and have different agendas, and that also makes a very complex situation. But thank you for your responses. Another one that has been raised as an issue, and unfortunately the media love to get clickbait, but this is about youth juvenile crime, seeing as a symptom rather than a problem in itself, a significant concern in many communities in conjunction with the mental health of young people. Too many young Indigenous people are caught up in the juvenile justice system, and many evidence-based recommendations regarding juvenile crime have been put to various governments everywhere. So the two questions with that are, how will you identify and address the root causes of juvenile crime and address the mental and social well-being of young people? That's kind of two questions for the price of one. And the second one is, what evidence-based solutions are you proposing or are being proposed when governments are wrestling with this? And we'll start, Dr. Richmond.
The only acceptable rate of crime is 0. We need to start with that premise. And there is an issue when people are the victim of crime. It's horrible. When we talk about statistics, though, there needs to be some honesty, and that's not what we're seeing. So, overall in Queensland, we are at near record low rates of youth crime. That is where we're at. And again, the only acceptable rate is 0, but that's where we're at. And the reason we're at that is the solution to youth crime is a basketball court. It's unpacking the generations of trauma that has led to people not having the right environment to grow up in. And that's why we see a population that was not counted as a citizen and then was not allowed to be educated, then having children who struggle to be proper parents. It is through support, it is through education, it is through empowerment, and it is through working with communities that we unpack an incredibly complex situation into the future. And that's what we're doing over time. What we do know is that slogans don't solve problems, and certainly putting someone in prison creates a criminal. Adult time creates adult crime, not the other way around. So, to say what are we going to do about it, well, that's what we're doing. There is a place for some adjustment, and we have seen that. And specifically what we have seen is removing the detention as a last resort, not because detention works, but sometimes it's needed. It is. The protection of society does need to come first. And that's where, if, getting back to the education question, to answer this one, legislative enforcement of an expert, being an expert, is not necessarily the solution. And forcing a magistrate to do one thing or to not do that thing is not the solution. It isn't to say that I want to lock someone up, but I want the magistrate to have the freedom to make the right choice in the right situation. I've got a big, long prepared one, but...
Sure. If you wanted a nuance on that, whack it into the Slido. Dr. Rowan.
Well, look, there's a lot of complexity around youth crime and these issues, but to give you some statistics under the tenure of the Palaszczuk-Miles government, and this is Queensland Police Service data statistics in Brisbane, the Brisbane North region, of which we live in, unlawful use of a motor vehicle is up 87%, unlawful entries are up 88%, other thefts have increased by 65%, and assaults have skyrocketed by 94%. So they're the statistics. Now, people locally and across the Brisbane Metro North region are experiencing that, and the same is happening across Queensland. But solving these issues is complex and it's difficult, and there needs to be two faceted aspects to that. One is around having appropriate laws and dealing with offenders, and that means there needs to be consequences for actions. The government watered down the Youth Justice Act in 2015-2016, where they removed breach of bail as an offence, and that means people who breached their bail, there was no consequences for their actions, and some of those people then progressed onto committing more crime and more serious crimes, and we've seen the consequences, including people losing their lives as a consequence of that. So one of the first acts of an LNP government would be to introduce the Making Queensland Safer laws, which is about consequences for actions, putting the rights of victims first, ensuring, breach of bail has now been restored as an offence, but removing detention as a last resort and going further than what was recently introduced by the Labor government would be the first bit of legislation that a new government would introduce and pass. That's on the legislative side. On the other side, when it comes to prevention, we need prevention and rehabilitation, and when we look at the value proposition return of how much money has been going into the system with respect to prevention and rehabilitation, the Auditor General has released a report which says we are not getting value for money when it comes to those programs which are currently being administered at the moment. So the LNP has announced two youth justice schools and also early intervention schools as well, with money attached to those. It's really important that we get young people back on track, keeping them engaged in schools and in homes, and getting proper parental supervision and involvement is critically important. The government can't do all of that, and that's why, as a community and communities generally, we all need to be working collectively together to ensure that young people get the opportunities that they need. They get love in their home, they get the support, they get to school, they learn to read and write, they learn how to be good citizens, to play a musical instrument and to get involved in sport. And that's a broader conversation that needs to happen through all of our communities when it comes to working with, whether it's our churches, our communities, our sporting organisations, our teachers collaboratively working together, and it would be fair to say, for a variety of reasons, that has not been as strong as it should have been, and we're seeing the consequences of that as well, and in specific population areas and specific geographical regions as well. So it's a combination of strong laws to deal with recidivist and repeat offenders, but also prevention and rehabilitation when it comes to those people that we can get back on track.
Thank you both. I think it's another one of those massive things. As a school teacher, I saw that again myself, and I have many friends who are music teachers who would say that, I don't know, probably for 20 years they haven't seen funding to keep music teachers in school. So I don't think that's picking on any particular party. It's just an issue with fitting so much stuff into certain hours of a day. I think what we have heard is there's a time where we need band-aids for certain situations, but so much needs to be proactive and preventative, and generational type things that, you know, this starts with kids in grade 1. You know, they don't suddenly become offenders. And I wonder, you know, this is just a moot question, that can we have a program that addresses children's education for 12 years when our political system never allows for that, without significant change regularly? Wouldn't it be great if we had some kind of agreed policy on how that's dealt with, regardless of who's in power? Me thinking out loud, feel free to ignore me completely. I don't know if we need to do the last question there, but there are a lot of questions on the Slido, and I want to make sure we've got time for those. But thank you so much for those answers to those main questions. There's lots on the Slido. Unfortunately, my phone just turned off. We're back on. Good. Can we, what's the code again for us where we live in? 8. But Dave, you've got it. I'll come over.
You want to use this? You want to use mine?
There's some with lots and lots of likes.
Yeah, they're in order of most ticked.
Of most ticked.
But,
There we go.
I have to say the abortion question there is like both sides have ticked that. So that's probably the top question that is being.
Yeah.
The issue that's been identified.
Yeah, it's got 15 likes, and I had about 12 half an hour ago. So, but the question here that has the most ticks says, what will you do to roll back the laws in Queensland that encourage abortions instead of protecting the life of unborn children? Again, a complex question, but I'd invite if
Right.
Sorry?
Just need to be clear, there's quite a number of questions too that are asking the other side to that question.
Oh, okay.
What will you do about protecting women's bodies? So
Oh, okay, right.
So there's both sides of the argument.
Yeah, I'm just seeing that.
The question being put to this issue.
Right, well, there's 2. Okay, so question 1 and 3 about maybe ask them both at the same time.
Well, I think
No?
just raise the issue as an issue and what.
Yeah, so on one hand about protecting the life of unborn children, another question that's high up there too is, as MPs, what's your attitudes to women's rights to control their own fertility and bodies? What are some of the issues that you need to deal with personally, professionally, as a party in coming to a position on how we make decisions about this kind of issue? Is that a question that's, yeah?
Well, with respect to the legislation, as we've made it very clear as a part of this campaign, and David Christopher's made it very clear, it's not part of our plan. There will be no changes to the legislation, and we've ruled that out. So that's to be very clear around the legislation. I think in relation to individual decision making, people need to be provided appropriate information and supports to make the decisions that they need to make in their specific individual circumstances, and they need to seek appropriate support from family and health professionals around that.
Thank you. Dr. Richmond.
So the Courier Mail had a lovely article today pointing out that the Katter Australia Party was going to put forward a private member's bill on this exact issue, which means that one of the two of us will have to vote on that issue in this coming Parliament. It's unavoidable. It will be a part of the issue whether we want it to or not. This is where you and I suspect, are as far apart as two people can get. Now, for clarity, I will vote to maintain a woman's right to choose. Absolutely. So I'll front load with that. I would like to see the rate of abortion as low as possible. But the way you reduce the rate of abortion is reducing the rate of unwanted pregnancy, not by making it unsafe and illegal. And you reduce the rate of unwanted pregnancy through education, through empowerment for people to control their own fertility, and through access to the means to control their own fertility. I didn't gender that conversation, nor did I say reduce their fertility. There is a place to assist people to increase their fertility if needed. But make no mistake, if elected and I face that Catter bill, absolutely I will protect a woman's right to choose. I hope that's clear enough.
Thank you both. I'm just trying to go through capturing different aspects of the various questions. There's another one here that says, I've heard that euthanasia laws might be being changed.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
I think everyone deserves to know where we both sit on this issue.
Okay,
Let me phrase it this way.
Sure.
The bill will be coming up. We will have to vote on it. There is no doubt about where I will stand. I think people deserve to know. And saying it's not part of the agenda is avoiding the question.
Okay, I'm just trying to nuance where people are getting at with the question, because one is about protecting someone's right to choose or protecting life of children. I'm wondering, is there any scope in that, I'm not aware of the bill, about amending the bill, or is it?
So the second part of the question of the rights of the unborn, I think that's been answered. The question about, I'm trying to get what you're specifically asking, but are you referring to the question that was on notice, or are you referring to?
I don't think there was any on notice about that topic. This just in the chat, there was someone, obviously there's a lot of people wanting to know about how can we more protect the life of unborn children, but at the same time people also wanting to say, how are we protecting the rights of women to control their bodies? And they're not mutually exclusive questions, and yet they do often, when there's a legislation, it makes things drop into one camp or another. My question was, I'm not aware of this bill, and whether this bill is about saying, where do you stand, or is the bill about amending what might be an existing legislation? I don't know.
So the question on notice that was sent out was related to assistance after birth, which is a separate part. That's a separate question. I'm not aware of the bill you're referring to. I'm sorry.
The Catter one you mentioned, I don't know.
The Catter one is more related to specifically, will abortion be illegal?
Right, so that's the question of the bill.
Yeah, so Robbie Catter is reported in the Courier Mail today of saying absolutely he will bring this up, and so everyone will have to vote on it. When pressed on it, the leader of the opposition was unable to explain how he would stop that from happening, and both the leader of the opposition and the Premier have said this will be a conscience vote, which means that each individual will have to vote on this matter. Sure. And it will not be able to be avoided, it will not be able to be shuffled under. This is an important issue. It's an emotive issue. It's a distressing issue on both sides. This is a really distressing thing.
I know some people know where they sit, and some are still wrestling with that. So if you know that, Dr. Rowan, and you want to respond, great. If you don't, I'm happy.
No, well, look, all I can confirm again is we've said the Liberal National Party, it's not part of our plan. We've ruled out any changes to the legislation. The legislation exists as it exists. It's not part of our plan. We have no plans to change it. We've ruled that out. With respect to other matters that are canvassed in the media about other parties, I can't really comment on those because there's no detail. There's nothing to actually look at around what the commentary has been around that. All I can say is in relation to the Liberal National Party. It's not part of our plan. There won't be changes to the legislation, and we've ruled that out.
I'm going to change tack. There's a question here, do you support a new high school for our local area? A lot of thumbs up on that one. Dr. Owen.
Well, absolutely. This has been an ongoing community campaign for a long period of time that we need an additional high school. When we look at not only our existing population but the broader region as well, there is no doubt that we need additional high school places. Kenmore State High School is at 2,200 students, and we've got Indooroopilly State School, at 130% capacity and using demountables there. So we need a new high school. There needs to be a lot of planning that goes into that, and I've announced as a part of this campaign $2 million to be allocated to the community consultation, the business plan and the processes around that, because site identification is really, really important. And there are a number of factors when you pick a particular site that will have implications for catchments. We obviously need to work with our local schools, the Department of Education and other stakeholders to get that right, and there are matters to do with public transport and other aspects as well, and that's why that is the first stage to getting the school. But we have committed absolutely 100% that there will be a new high school built by the Liberal National Party in the electorate of Moggill. We have committed to that. The $2 million in relation to the business case is getting the consultation, the planning, the site identification and all of the other elements in place so that we get it right. And by getting it right, then we can deliver for local families, for students and others. It still means that there needs to be an investment in Kenmore State High School's infrastructure master plan, because that's needed there. They've got facilities. And I'm pleased from opposition that we have a new school hall that will be built at Kenmore State High School. So that's already been money that's been allocated for that, as well as additional classrooms at Kenmore State High School. So as part of this campaign, I'm very pleased to announce that that's been committed to and been publicly announced.
Wonderful. Dr. Richmond, have you got a response for that one?
Yeah, I do. So do I support a new school? Absolutely. Okay. Where we do differ, and there's been a little bit of, I don't know, the term is match and exceed, but there has been a bit of, yep, okay, we'll do that too. And I am on record saying, no, we are not doing the $2 million planning study. So I think you deserve to understand where that no came from. That is not to say at all that we do not support a new school. That's not at all. The Department of Education has a standing body that looks at this continuously. Bureaucrats and experts in the field look at where schools should be placed, when they should be placed, and all of that. That is an ongoing process. To spend $2 million of your money to hire a bunch of bureaucrats to do what a bunch of bureaucrats do speaks to me of waste. Now, my understanding, if I'm wrong, then I'm happy to change my position and say yes, but my understanding is that school placement is not a political decision. Otherwise, every swing electorate would have 10 high schools, and every safe electorate would have 1. And for that reason, I have not committed to something that my understanding is not a political decision. Now, I have not been the shadow spokesperson for education. I am a doctor, not a teacher. If I'm wrong, then I will fight like hell to get a new school, because I agree. It's a long way to go from Moggill to Kenmore. And I agree our schools feel pretty full. But what I'm not... Sorry. Yes, of course you can respond. Just give me a moment to finish. Christian, I will absolutely acknowledge this has been a passion project of yours. And absolutely, I acknowledge that you are putting money towards something. The reason I have not agreed to this one is because, to me, it smacks of waste. And hiring $2 million worth of bureaucrats to do what bureaucrats do does not make sense to me. But if I'm wrong, then I will change my opinion, and I'll fight like hell, because, yeah, absolutely, I want another school out here, 100%.
Dr. Owen, just quickly.
Well, with respect to Dr. Richmond, he's wrong in this sense that having this money allocated is fundamentally a part of the process of getting the site identification right, the planning works, the consultation that needs to take place, because we don't have the available land or the site or the community agreement on where it needs to be. And there are a number of factors that go into that, including also the changing catchments that would mean, particularly if you built at Mount Crosby versus Bellbowrie or Moggill or Pinjarra Hills. So there's a bit of complexity around that, and that's why it's really, really important to do that. With respect to schools being built for political purposes, we had the Brisbane South State Secondary College, which was put in the electorate of South Brisbane, which was a decision of Jackie Trads and the then Education Minister. The Fortitude Valley State Secondary College, which also have very, very low numbers. They were both political decisions to build those particular schools there. And even in Rockhampton, with respect to Gracemere, the government made a decision to build the school there, which the LNP has backed in as well. So there are political decisions that are made about building schools, but for us locally here, it's not a political decision, it's actually about the need. And the need exists for not only what we're seeing at Ipswich State High School, in relation to Kenmore State High School, in relation to Indooroopilly and even Centenary as well. There is the justification when you look at local government data, when you look at the Australian Bureau of Statistics, the Queensland Statistician's Office, what's reported to us by local community groups and organisations and other educational providers. That's why I've committed to it. I would love the Labor government to commit to it as well, but unfortunately the petitions that have been sponsored to the government and the responses that we've had back from various education ministers under the current Labor government has been, you will not have a new high school. So we do need, and it would be fantastic if Eric is able to come on board and do that at some stage and commit to it. But as I've said, this is the first stage of getting this right, and the LNP will build a school in our area to be available for local students, families and teachers.
Thanks, Dr. Owen. I think I heard in that both of you think a new school here is awesome. Yep. So how it happens, we don't know, but to know that you both support that, I think for me is a wonderful thing. There's a few questions here again about our local community, about public active transport, Moggill out to the sports park, congestion, Moggill Road, how humans move from A to B, I guess summarises a few of those. Could you let us know about what's in the works or in the pipelines about what's currently happening or what's on the horizon for what's happening in terms of transport around here? I know bus Karana people, is that, etc. You want to start with that, Eric?
So there is definitely a traffic issue, and there's definitely a get here from there. I had a lovely meeting with the bicycle users group about this. One of the needs that came up, because there's some obvious places to put bike routes, but it becomes a bit of a bridge to nowhere in that the infrastructure needs to exist the entire way. So I am a strong supporter of essentially all modes of transport working. As our population grows, and we know our population is growing a lot, we are going to need everything. We are going to need buses, we are going to need active transport, and we are going to need more roads. So we will need all of those. Specific questions, the elephant in the room being the Kenmore bypass. But specific questions about specific projects solve fewer problems than an overall integrated plan. I have started those discussions. I am not completely up to speed yet. I will be very honest about that. But I had a meeting with the Transport Minister recently to start those discussions to hit the ground running. The integrated travel plan in general is going to need to engage a lot of active transport, and also a reduction in the cost of public transport is partially how you encourage it. Specific questions around bus routes, so there is, I'll let you take the credit for it. One of the things I have not matched is an extension of a bus route. I think that at the point that you have someone who wishes to be in state parliament arguing about the route of a bus, we're getting too deep into the weeds. I don't have any objection to the 444 being extended. Sure, fine. I just don't think it needs an act of parliament to happen. And Where we see increased use, increased ridership, you then see increased services. And that's where the 50-cent fares became such a big deal, because we are starting to see that increasing ridership and that increasing use that then justifies the increasing number of buses and number of means. It's an annoying question, I'm sorry, but, sorry, an annoying answer. The question is fair. Apologies. It's a good question with an annoying answer, and I apologize.
Thank you, Dr. Richmond. Dr. Rowan, anything to add there?
Well, I think what we deal with is a lack of planning over 60 or 70 years, or even longer than that. So we have some significant issues when it comes to planning, which, you know, having a single road in and out predominantly, which is Moggill Road into our area, and when we've seen the growth in, you know, development over that period of time, it's no wonder that we have, you know, traffic congestion. So our planning instruments, when it comes to both the interaction between state and local government, certainly needs to be looked at. There is scope for improvement when it comes with respect to that. But in relation to resolving the issues that we do have and what we can do, we need integrated road and public transport planning for the entire Western Suburbs corridor. Certainly that's been missing over a long period of time. That requires all levels of government to step up to the mark. That requires the federal government to allocate funding through Infrastructure Australia, the state government to play its role in relation to state-controlled roads, and local government with respect to Brisbane City Council particularly, but also elements of Ipswich City Council as well when we look at the western aspect. So all of those governments working together and taking their jurisdictional responsibilities, allocating the funding, but it's a big body of work, and the Western Suburbs corridor compared with when you look to the Sunshine Coast or the Gold Coast, we're talking about, you know, the Bruce Highway at times and the M1, but really when you look from Springfield to Toowong to and through Indooroopilly all the way out to where we are and out to the Mount Crosby Warrego interchange, there is a huge body of work that needs to be done for that entire region, and that's why that integrated planning piece probably needs to be led by Infrastructure Australia, with the other levels of government being involved with that. Obviously, there's been some work on the centenary bridges, which is good. That work that's taken place, there has been delayed, it hasn't been on time, and it is over budget, but it's good to get that done. When it comes to public transport and active transport as well, there are significant issues with respect to cyclist safety that need to be resolved, as well as pedestrian safety as well. And again, just coming back to the Moggill District Sports Ground, you know, as part of this campaign, I've announced $1.1 million to get a footpath built from Moggill State School out to the sports park, and that's about, you know, getting those students who want to travel out to there and others to be able to access that infrastructure and facility out there, and not just by car.
So no TARDISes yet?
No.
Unfortunately. Again, a big issue, complicated issue, and thank you for your responses. There's a couple of ones here that have had lots of likes, so I do want to respect them and be able to ask them, but they're... Feel free to, it's not directed at anyone in particular. One comment here is, I've heard that euthanasia laws might be being changed. What are the candidates' views? And just for clarification, whether that's the bill about voluntary assisted dying, which I don't know anything about that, but... Yeah.
That would relate to the legislation that was passed in relation to voluntary assisted dying. So from a Liberal National Party perspective, there will not be any changes to the legislation.
And from my point of view, I mean, obviously the Labor Party wrote the legislation, so they're not going to change it. If you want to know my position, I had an amazing conversation with a 101-year-old woman in this electorate who was going through the process when I went in to sit down with her. I am not a voluntary assisted dying practitioner. It's not in my practitioner set, but I have been there at the end of many, many lives. I have seen people die in pain. I have seen people die screaming. I have seen people suffocate to death. And I have held a lot of hands at the end. I have also seen beautiful, beautiful deaths where the timing was right and the people were able to make the last decision about their own life in a way that preserved their comfort, their dignity, and paid true tribute to the life they had lived instead of focusing on the end. This is important legislation. It is not about ending, it is not about death, it is about respectfully ending a life, and I strongly support it.
Thank you both for that. There's a question here about, it says, are you going to reject or support the nuclear option? I don't think the paper's called the nuclear option paper, but...
That's something else.
If you have any comments about where you or the party might be in terms of pursuing nuclear power as a potential future energy source.
It's not part of our energy plan, and we've consistently said that. And David Crisafulli, our leader, has said that. It's not part of our energy plan.
Sure.
I have no particular safety concerns around nuclear energy in Australia. I have economic concerns. So here's the thing. The cheapest form of electricity by far is solar, but little known fact, the sun doesn't shine at night.
What?
It's a rare fact. It is possible and quite straightforward to store electricity during the day to use at night. It is not possible to store electricity in summer to use in winter. So there is a place for nuclear. In Canada, for example, you either use nuclear or you're using coal or gas or something like that. It's your only choice. They don't refer to sunny Canada. They do refer to sunny Queensland. For economic reasons, I think nuclear is the wrong option. And it is because independent experts have said this is by far the most expensive form of power. It is also going to be 40 years for us to get it up and running. We don't have 40 years.
There's a question here. There's two questions that are similar, so I'll try to bundle them together. One is, one question talks about, as for both parties, I'll go to the first one. It says here, given the divisive and destructive positions and statements of some of the Greens party people in relation to Israel, it says here, will Labor, but I guess for both of you is how might this affect how that places Greens on preference sheets for voting cards for your two parties? Another question that's similar says, will you commit to preferencing the Greens party last given their increasingly extreme agenda? So I guess there's some questions here about how has what's been happening in the news with some of the Greens locally, is that affecting anything preference-wise, or are there other comments that you'd like to make regarding that?
Well, look, I've been very concerned about the approach by certain elected Greens representatives in relation to matters with respect to Israel and Palestine. And certainly, as I said earlier, I moved to the area in 1975, predominantly lived in the western suburbs for most of my life, but been away and come back. And to see some of the graffiti that we've seen in the western suburbs about killing the Jews and gassing the Jews has been very distressing. And I'd have to say, I never thought in my lifetime, having grown up in the western suburbs, that I would actually see that, and it's happened very, very rapidly. I think it's incumbent upon all elected representatives and those who believe in our democracy and our freedoms and our values to call that out when we see it. And I think that some of the reckless conduct of certain Greens representatives has fostered that social division, which is not in keeping with what I'd say is Australian values and our way of life. So with that, and with many of the policies of the Greens, and with not revealing how we're marking our cards, because that's all going to be revealed pretty soon when it comes to our how to vote cards. But I'd have to say that out of what we sort of see politically, I'm minded for the Greens to be last, and that's certainly what our party has been saying, the Liberal National Party has been saying for many, many reasons. So I think those things and some of the things around the social disruption and the attacks on our democratic institutions and other things cause me grave concerns. And there is a lot of complexity in the world that's going on. So for those reasons, I believe the Greens should be last on ballot papers.
Thank you, Dr. Owen. Dr. Richmond?
I find it odd when you and I agree about anything. And What we agree about is there is no place whatsoever for political parties to be sowing dissent. The rise of anti-Semitism is really concerning. It is genuinely concerning. There is a historical precedent to this that is bad. And it is incumbent upon all leaders, elected or otherwise, to not do that. It is not okay. I get to dodge the preference one, and the reason I get to dodge the preference one is I have absolutely no say in it whatsoever. And so that was an interesting one because that was told to me before I was even running, is that I do not get to make this decision. And so I rudely get to completely dodge the question.
Oh, we do what we can. Scrolling through, there's a lot of other questions, and in the interest of time, we don't have time to go through all of those. Many of them, I think, have been indirectly answered from others, and for those who've put some online there, I apologise that we can't get to all of them. But I thought, just as a final question, just to wrap up, and it might touch on things we've already heard tonight, but, you know, if there was one thing that changed in the next 12 months, because whether whoever gets elected as a local candidate, whoever forms government, what's one thing that if that changed, you'd be like, awesome. There's one thing that no matter who was elected and whichever government formed power, if that thing changed, that would just be personally a wonderful thing to see. Does that question make sense? Would you like to start?
For me, it'd be civility in public life. So I would say that we all have different perspectives and views, but I think being able to listen to other people's views and respect that is really, really important. It's fundamental to our democracy and the strength of our democracy. And I think one of the greatest risks has been social media. And there are things that are written in social media and on platforms that people wouldn't normally say to people's faces. They don't connect and talk to people individually. So I think that sense of restoring civility and community engagement and connectedness is really, really important. Governments can't do all of that, but I think collectively between governments and communities, individuals, bringing that all together would be something I'd love to see in the next 12 months. I don't think it's going to happen in 12 months, but I think if we can get back on track and restore that would be a terrific outcome.
Fabulous.
Without disagreeing, because yes. If I could magically change one thing, it would be getting truth back into discussions and to have facts be facts. And for there not to be this rise, and it's worse in other countries than it is here, but it is happening here, of overt misinformation, overt disinformation, and people just making stuff up.
Yeah.
And it makes it very difficult to have an intelligent conversation and a respectful conversation. We can differ. That's fine. We can have a different outcome. We can see a different way we want Australia going. You should see a difference. That's the point. Because then you get to pick the person who is going the direction you want to go, and that's how democracy works. We should all have the same set of facts at the start. There may be a legislative role, but I think it's the realm of magic to get social media to not push us as far apart as they are, and people living in their own information bubbles. Yeah. And that's across the board. That is not a jab at one side or the other. That is across the board. People live in their own information bubbles and have their own set of facts that are mutually exclusive with each other. It makes it very difficult for us to be a society that can have conversations. It is very okay to not agree. It is very okay to say, I want Australia to go there and you want Australia to go there. That's great. And it's absolutely okay for us as a group to say, we collectively are going over there even though you want to go over there. Okay, that's how democracy works. But if we could fix the misinformation and disinformation that is out there, that would be my magic.
There you go. I think you accidentally just answered someone else's question on Slido too, so bonus to them. Thank you both so much for tonight. Just a couple of reminders for people that you're performing again. I mean, you're going to be at a community forum on Tuesday night at Chapel Hill Uniting Church, and the other candidates will also be there, I believe. And it's a public forum. There'll be people from all walks of life with us. I don't know if it's using Slido or that kind of thing, but some of that stuff we'll hear again, and there'll be opportunities to hear more stuff. So if you love these kind of things, Tuesday at Chapel Hill, it's in the bulletin. Next Thursday night, shameless plug, we're having Greg will be here, we've got a community event here. The food trucks come every second week, for those who don't know. There's parked just on here on the Gully. So we're going to have some tables, chairs, music and fairy lights and board games for those who want to eat their pizza and have fun at the same time, and not just stand around waiting for the pizza to cook. So feel free to come along and play games and have fun and munch food next Thursday. But can we thank Dr. Eric Richmond and Dr. Christian Rowan for coming along tonight. Dave has some brown paper bags for you.
Thank you, fellas. In the great tradition of Queensland politics, I've got a brown paper bag for each one of you. Good, different, without getting into the supermarket duopoly, which is another complete other issue. But thank you very much for your willingness to come tonight. 40 people online, 30 or so people here. I think we've done what we were kind of hoping for. 70 online.
Yeah, 25 watched the whole thing continuously.
There you go. So there's interest in this election. Every blessing to you both. And I think our final word is to thank you for offering your services to us as a community. It's really appreciated, your willingness to put your lives, your careers up for grabs, and in a sense to say to the community, to put yourself in this place of the community is something that we honour, and we respect you both for. Thank you very much.
A big thank you to all those who helped make tonight possible, and behind the scenes and tonight, and thank you to all of you for coming and contributing with the Slido, and have a wonderful evening and travel safe.